From the four corners of Beverly Hills, I'm Max Schwartz. This is Let's Talk Politics, and it starts right now. Today, as my in-studio guest, the chairman of the Citizens Oversight Committee and a co-Nobel Prize recipient in the year 2007, Dr. Woodrow Clark II. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Clark. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, Max.
My pleasure. And for those that are interested, we did Congressman Waxman. That show was fantastic. Thank you for everyone that watched and for reading the Patch article on that. And in terms of national news, Illinois is the next big delegate primary in terms of delegate count, which will be Tuesday. I'm going to make sure I have my date, which will be next Tuesday, or the Tuesday. There are 69 delegates up for grabs during this primary. Now, without further ado, let's talk politics. So you are the chairman of the Citizens Oversight Committee. Why did you decide to become chairman?
Actually, I didn't decide. The committee voted for me to be chairman. We had a new committee appointed last spring, and then we had a meeting, I believe it was in August of last year. And there were people nominated, and I was nominated and voted on unanimously by the members of the committee.
Okay, so because you didn't decide you were chosen, why did you decide to accept the nomination?
Oh, okay. Well, because I've been on the committee for 2 terms before, 2 years, and when it was first formed in, I believe it was the spring of 2008, and what concerned me, frankly, was how our money is being spent in Beverly Hills for the public schools. And so I had been very active with the committee under the first 2 chair people, and then I wanted to continue with it, and I was reappointed by the school board, and then new members were also appointed as well. So we had 3 members from before, plus me was 4, and then we had 6 new members, and I wanted to stay with it and continue to work with the group.
Okay, and how do you believe your occupation has given you the tools you need to become chairman and work as a valued member of this committee?
You mean my background?
Yes.
How much time we got?
Professional background.
Professional background. Well, it takes a lot. I have 3 different earned master's degrees from 3 different universities. I have a Ph.D. also from the University of California, Berkeley, and actually it's in higher education. My dissertation was on violence in public schools, so I know a little bit about schools as well. I've also been a public school teacher for a lot of my career, and also taught at the university level and graduate school level. I consider myself, when you add all that together, as a qualitative economist, and that's a whole other thing that we could talk about. But basically what I'm concerned about is numbers. I was appointed to be Governor Davis's renewable energy advisor about a decade ago when we had an energy crisis here in California, and we had people giving us numbers like 1 + 1 = 7. Remember those days? Well, maybe you're too young for that. But the point is, these were validated by CPA firms and others, and the net result is we found that companies like Enron and others were lying, basically. They're giving us false numbers and information. So what we did is made it a point to investigate that, and some of those people have now they're in jail now and serving terms.
So you believe your background in education and also in government makes you a proven choice for chairman of this committee?
That plus the fact I'm very, very aware of business. I actually have my own small business. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12 years old, so I have some business background and work in that too. And I've also had as a consultant since the recall of Governor Davis, have been working as a consultant with different school districts and colleges and universities all over the world. So I've got that kind of experience to add as well.
Okay, that's very good. And for those that want to know more about Dr. Clark's background, I encourage you to visit his website. We will be discussing his role as chairman of the Citizens Oversight Committee and their role with the Measure E bond, not about Dr. Clark's background as an individual. I apologize for that. Okay. What are the responsibilities of the Citizens Oversight Committee, and how does the committee interact with the Board of Education?
Well, we have monthly meetings. The people who are on the committee all applied for it. They were interviewed by the school board members. This is about a year ago now. And frankly, the school board members at that time all had a set of questions they would ask each of the people applying, and then they narrowed it down, and after checking backgrounds and other things, to a small group of people, 10 of us right now. And in part of the report that we just gave to the school board last Tuesday, we in fact recommend that there are more people added. We can have up to 13 members. We now have 10. So the point is, what we want to do is identify people who have a background and interest in Beverly Hills, but also have certain skill bases. We want people who know something about numbers and accounting. We want some legal minds involved. We want people who know about architecture and construction. And we certainly want to have people involved who know about business practices.
And you make a very interesting point about the number 10. And I know this may not sound as significant to some as it does others, but most committees and most bodies, especially those in government, have an odd number, such as the Supreme Court, which they have 9 instead of 8 or 10. How does your committee function with 10 members, and isn't it important to have an odd number when there's a vote?
Well, as you probably know, under the Brown Act and other scenarios in which we operate, there are, in fact, odd numbers in the committee. We frankly are looking to have 13, which would be an odd number. But what as a chairperson, my role, I feel, is to get a consensus among everybody. Every single vote that this committee has taken since I've been chair has been in consensus. It's never been split, and we haven't even had people who felt that they, have a different opinion or want to abstain in some way or another. So the point is to bring us all together, because we're all on the same page. We're all doing this as a going forward in terms of the future.
Okay, and this was kind of touched on a bit earlier, but just to reiterate to make sure we're out there in the clear, the Citizens Oversight Committee is in charge of managing the Measure E bond money, correct?
Yeah, let's backing up a little bit. The school district has had other bond monies all coming under the purview of Proposition 39, which was passed about a decade ago. Measure K, which preceded Measure E, which we are now the Oversight Committee for, had an Oversight Committee as well. And Measure K, as you may remember, or if you know, is roughly about $160, $180 million. Measure E, the current measure for buildings at the school district, is for $334 million.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the Oversight Committee is to watch that money in terms of how it's being spent. Not to tell the district how to spend it, not to tell the superintendent or the facilities people, but after the money is spent, to sort of check and watch where it's going and how it's being used.
And also, not only to that, but I believe it's also to analyze interest rates and make sure the income stays.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. In other words, when you look at the money, you also want to know what the interest rates are, the percentages, when things are due, and what new things will be coming around.
And with that, we're going to be jumping right into what you discussed at the board meeting on March 13th. During that presentation, you showed a PowerPoint which includes statistics related to the Measure E bond, and there was talk about how the money's been spent, what it's been spent on, as well as interest rates and the bank that was chosen to manage the money. How has the bond's worth adjusted during these hard economic times?
That's going to take a long answer, but let me see if I can kind of address it in pieces. The first thing is that the actual report itself, which is 14 pages long, with those charts that you just mentioned, are not only available through the school district's board presentations, but also on site, our site, on the website of the Oversight Committee, so that everybody can take a look and read through it. We had only a few minutes really to present a lot of information at the school board meeting, so consequently some of those charts got a little compressed, if you will, and I think it was a little confusing for a lot of people watching. But basically what's happened is that the school district in our report covers the fiscal year ending June 2011, last year. That's the first part of the report, going back for a couple of years, so we're putting all that information under Measure E together. Then we had the last 6 months of 2011, ending in December this last year, as also part of our report, because while that's not audited money, I mean in terms of getting an analysis of how it's been spent, we thought it appropriate for our annual report to include that information, both the audited part and the unaudited part. We will have, and probably now have, a report every 6 months, meaning we'll have another report ready for the public sometime probably in July or early August, because the next fiscal year ends in June, and there'll be an audit from that point, and we'll be able to have that information.
Okay. And going back to my original question is, how has the bond's worth adjusted due to these hard economic times and the income of the bond? Has it decreased, increased, and what, if it has decreased, what is your committee doing to try to regenerate the revenues lost due to interest rates?
Yeah, well, actually, there's not revenues lost. What's happened is that we have economic times. And the bonds are based on a property assessment for every person who lives in Beverly Hills. And so right now, I think it's around $49 and change or whatever. And I think that's what originally the voters voted to approve a couple of years ago. I believe in 2008 it was. So the consequence of that is, no, 2007 was approved. But the consequence is that if we have bad economic times, we know that that actual valuation of a person's home is going to probably decrease. Hence, it's going to be difficult for a lot of people. The reason I mention that is because, and I can't really comment about it because the school district is now discussing it now. Here we are in 2012, and they haven't made decisions. But the issue is how much more bond money will we draw to use for the buildings of the school district. So that discussion is actually ongoing. There's going to be a study session on Tuesday, April 3rd, with the school district open to the entire public, where these issues will be brought up and talked in public. But it has to do with drawing down more bond money at a particular interest rate.
So has the overall value or worth of the bond decreased since it was last passed?
I don't think so, because you have to look at the other end of it, the cost factor. The cost factor is much lower today than it has been in the past, partly because there's a lot of people who need work and construction. We're getting very good bids, and we're getting very good even materials and supply estimates. So actually, it's kind of adjusted itself in that way. The major issue I think that you're trying to get at is, have we gotten our bang for our buck? And I would say the answer to that is something you're, I'm sure, aware of. we had some major problems with how the money was being spent until we had some investigations being done, and then there have been some settlements in terms of what some of the fees and costs have been in the past.
Okay. So how does and I believe we already touched on this, but does the COC plan to do anything to regenerate part of the money that was either lost or that had to be decreased due to the economic downturn in which housing values dropped?
Well, let's put it this way. The first thing that we were concerned about is how the money was being spent initially. And what we found was that there was money being spent, and this was under the lawsuits involving Christensen, who was the former manager of all of this, frivolously, frankly. And that's what the court decided, and that's what the judgments have been about, et cetera. In the meanwhile, in 2011, we had a settlement and a repayment to the district from one of the, if you will, clients of her firm of $2.5 million. And there's been since then in 2012 another $2.5 million. But in our report, we only talk about the $2.5 million because it was in 2011. So when you start adjusting those things, we realize we're now getting in a much more, not just cautious, but really watching the money and how it's being spent.
And is there a plan to, once the bond money, or if it hits back to its point when that was expected to when it was approved, will there be a plan to increase the overall value or worth of the bond?
Well, that's the issue that's before the board right now as we speak. I mean, the issue really now is, do we go and have, it's being talked about with the facilities advisory committee at the school district, which I think is going to be meeting next week to discuss this in detail. It was discussed at our last COC meeting, which was just yesterday. It was also discussed at the financial advisory group to the school district itself about a week or so ago. So this discussion is now ongoing. And as I said, on April 3rd, for those people listening to this program, may want to go to the school board meeting and hear the study session on where this is going to be interactive and get some of the details. But the fact is, there are 4 different options that are being proposed. And those different options are the things to which people will have to think about and where they go in the future.
Okay. And we'll let people wait to hear from the board regarding what those 4 options are.
Yeah, I think it's beyond my scope and role to really talk about that. I'll just say that that's coming up.
That's good. And we'll moving on now, rather from the technical aspects and economic aspects to the actual spending of money, which has been a big topic throughout the season here on Let's Talk Politics. So there are multiple projects planned in the Beverly Hills Unified School District.
Right.
Which of those projects are going to be paid for using the Measure E bond, and how much will those cost?
Well, okay. First of all, Measure E, under Proposition 39 and under what the voters in Beverly Hills passed, the $334 million, is primarily focused on certain things. It's not to rebuild all the schools in the district. It's basically to look for safety and security of the schools, areas that have to be sort of reinforced or adjusted because of earthquake or fault problems. Part of the analysis is being done here at the high school right now is a result. The geotechnical stuff is a part of that.
And we're going to talk about that in a moment.
Oh, good. You got some pictures of it, too? I had some students ask me, are they digging in a subway underneath the high school? I said, no, that's not happening. But the idea is to do the analysis, is to find out what it is. But it's not just at the high school. We have problems with hazmat and other things at some of the other schools. They're environmental problems. They're dangerous to you and your family and other children. It's just really a very important issue to get at, and that's part of what the responsibility of the money is for.
Do we know how much, or do you know how much all of this will end up costing?
Well, that's what's happening right now as we speak. We have, to kind of be very specific, we have a program set up which has been approved by the school board and going through the facilities management here at the district for specific improvements to Horace Mann. I believe it's starting with the theater this summer in June or sometime in there. Then there's also plans for other areas of Horace Mann. There's also some plans that are now being discussed regarding Hawthorne School. I have a feeling, though, that might be changed a little bit depending on how the money for the other bond money will be used.
Okay.
Because one of the key factors here is we have issues going on at the high school. And those issues have to be addressed immediately.
Yes.
They can't be put off for 2 or 3 or 4 years after you graduate from law school or something. You've got to be doing this right away.
Yes.
It's a very important thing. It's very dangerous.
That you bring up an interesting point, because these are, as I like to call them, emergency expenditures or unexpected expenditures relating to the high school, and any geotechnical drilling, if that's the correct term. Is the bond set up to deal with these emergency expenditures?
Well, that's actually, the school district itself has a fund or financial responsibility for emergency situations at each of the schools.
Yeah.
But the issue about longer term, I mean, that's for example, if we have a safety issue or if we need ID cards or something like that, that's not part of the bond money. That's something the school district do. And I'll come back to an issue that I heard recently of the school board about that. But the fact of the matter is there are buildings here on this campus, here at the high school, that are not safe. Now, I'm not trying to scare anybody about it, but they have got to be fixed. Not 10 years from now, but I'm talking about sooner than later.
Yeah.
So the priorities that we have already seen coming from, if you will, the school district itself and from the board have got to be looked at very carefully in terms of what's going to happen sooner than later. I know the plan is to do Horace Mann. That's starting. But I know the next plan was to do Hawthorne. And then after that, it was to do one of the other schools or whatever. But that gets into something that's very important. We had under Measure K repairs done to Beverly Vista. And I can tell you, we are having the district relook at that, and the district is doing that because the latent defects that have been showing up all over the place at Beverly Vista, which should have been corrected under the other measure, have got to be straightened out today. You can't continually have leaks in roofs or power that doesn't work or toilets that don't run or showers that are not operating. You can't have that in a school. It's unacceptable. If we had the health department in here, they'd say, hey, wait a minute, time out, close it down. We got to repair all this. So these things have got to be done. School district's got to cover some of it, but on the other hand, those companies responsible for doing this work before have got to be brought to account. No question about it. And that's one of the things we think the district is looking into very seriously right now. We know we've asked them to do that.
Yes. And I want to touch on a point you made earlier, which was what the bond covers and what the district covers. And I know that there are very strict guidelines regarding what the bond will be able to cover and what it won't be able to cover, and that's due to legislation in Sacramento, not due to school board discretion.
Well, it's also due to the voters. Remember, the voters voted for Measure E specifically for what was in that measure. And it's kind of like all of us voting for the Metro in Southern California to go from L.A. to the sea. We didn't know it was going to go through our high school. No one told us that. And that's the issue.
Yes, and I also, but in addition to what the voters passed, I believe there is legislation on what is technically allowed and what not allowed to pay for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in all these projects that you discussed, will the bond be able to pay legally all of the costs associated with these projects, or not all of them?
Well, it actually should be doing that. But one thing I want to point out, when your viewers and others take a look at our financial statements, you're going to see things. We have categories of things in there, and one is legal costs. But under those legal costs are also the engineering cost and the analysis that the district is doing. It's probably mislabeled. It should be, say, legal and engineering or legal and seismic or whatever. But those costs are justified. I already mentioned the issue about we already had a settlement regarding, and there's still more to be settled, by the way, from the past misspending of money. But the second thing is the past cost on the Measure K measure, latent defects cost, and there are other things that we have to be accountable for.
Yes, and I believe from speaking last year with the former chairman, Mr. Rudy Cole, engineers and legal fees are engineers and attorneys are the only quote-unquote salaries that are allowed to be paid for from the bond, because it can't be used to pay school district salaries, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
if there's somebody from the school district or people to be brought on, they're either as contractors or they're taking off the payroll from the school district and put on the payroll of the Measure E money.
Okay, and you talk about the geoseismic testing, if that's the correct term for it, and there has been a lot of issues with this, especially because I know I was told, at least by certain people involved with the school district, that originally it was only supposed to take a month, and we still have part of our lawn covered or fenced in now. So I want to talk to you about that for a moment. Technically, the bond is allowed to pay for the geothermal or let me rephrase it, the deep fault testing that has been going on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree. I was told that this would all be covered over by like last month or something like that, and it's still out there, I know. But so I'm not sure what's delaying that. But the point is yes. The answer is yes. The reason is because the safety and security of the school is at risk. Your safety, okay, the teacher's safety, the parents that come on the campus. Those kids are coming to school next year as freshmen. They're all at risk if we don't do something about this. So we've got to act. That's responsibility of the Measure E money.
And that deep fault testing is that in direct response to the MTA, or was this done?
No, it was going to be done anyway, because you got to remember the one thing I'm sure everyone in the community knows. By the way, one of the reasons we put our report and we had the pictures of the schools, we do have a lot of people here in Beverly Hills who are relatively new to the community and don't really know where, talk about Hawthorne, where's that? Where's the high school even? So we wanted to let everybody know kind of where the buildings were themselves. But here at the high school, we actually have an oil derrick out here, pumping oil. I mean, some people say, oh, that's great artwork and nice sculpture, whatever. No, that's what it's hiding, frankly, is the pumping of oil. Now, we also realize that the community gets money from the sale of that oil. I won't comment on that. That's a whole other story. It's another time to ask me about it. It's a personal opinion. It has nothing to do with the COC. But the fact is that those oil wells, the pumping and distribution of those wells, that is the pipes, all are a safety issue, and a safety issue that has to be addressed.
So this default testing was going to be done anyway to test the integrity of the buildings and to see whether it was possible to build.
Yeah, as a matter. So we've already been testing Horace Mann. We're going to be testing next El Rodeo. I mean, all the schools have to be. If you look at a map, an engineering map of the region, you'll see there's various areas here that are really serious problems. This whole city is built on a desert. I mean, let's be honest about it. We have really serious problems here, and we have to make sure we know what we're doing before we do anything.
Yes, and those results will also be used. Will they be used, in fact, to fight the MTA?
I'm not sure I can comment about that.
Okay.
I have my own personal professional opinion about that, but it's not. I don't want to really decide that with the COC.
Well, thank you for setting the record straight on that, because I know a lot of people were confused of what the true purpose of that drilling was. I'm going to continue talking about the MTA because it is a very important issue. We're getting in, this is the subway segment of the show for those that are waiting for me to formally address it.
I see your last question addresses it too. We'll get into that. That's
okay.
Good. All right.
The MTA, we know they're expected to have a decision soon. We're waiting. It was supposed to happen by late winter. And we're waiting. It essentially could happen any day now.
Right.
Because the safety of the schools are at risk, and I'm quoting you from what you said earlier in the program, will the bond be able to pay for legal fees associated with fighting the MTA if it comes down to fighting the MTA in court?
It's a hard thing to say yes or no about, but I would assume yes.
Okay. And that's allowed even though it's considered a salary?
No, if you're having a lot, we don't have in-house legal counsel, so it has to be outside.
Okay. So thank you for commenting on that. I appreciate it. So in terms of what the bond money has already been spent on, how much money has been spent and what exactly has it been spent on?
Well, let's start off with, as I said, there's a difference between last summer in terms of spending of money and what happened prior to that, both in terms of the COC and also in terms of the...
for the Measure E bond.
The Measure E bond. I'm only talking Measure E.
Yeah.
And in terms of what happened before that, and then, of course, the legal issues that have come up as a result of that in the last couple of years.
Okay.
But the point is that we have drawn down, if you will, bond money of roughly it's either 72 or $74 million. Of that money, about 10 or 11 million has been spent, and as our report points out, 11 million of that all happened as the end of fiscal year last year, June 30th, 2011.
Okay.
Then another $1.5 million or so in the last 6 months of 2011. So that's roughly what it is. In terms of the allocation of that money, most of it has been for planning and for construction advice, and some of it, of course, for looking at the legal and engineering problems of the schools. The issue, though, is where we'll start spending more money and where that money will go. And most of it at the moment is targeted for Horace Mann because that's, in fact, the first school to be built, basically.
And I want to touch back on the MTA because that's important to know what the money has already been spent. Actually, I do have a follow-up on that. So how much money is actually remaining in the bond?
Well, this particular drawdown on the bond is roughly about another $60–70 million. I'm pretty sure I'm correct. I have to look up the actual number about that. But the other part of it is that we have another drawdown that's slated, I believe, in 2014. Maybe 2013 now that I think about it. And then after that there's another schedule. But the issue is there are 4 different options in terms of schedules. And each of those options is an amount of money plus a percentage of interest that would be paid on it.
And have those already been approved by your committee and it's waiting for the board?
No. See, we don't approve that.
Okay.
It's what in other words, we can give input or suggestions or feedback, but it's not our job to approve it. That's actually the decision that the board has to make. And that's, again, the April 3rd meeting.
Okay. And the April 3rd meeting will address all of the next scheduling. I want to touch back on the MTA for a moment. If it comes down to fighting the MTA because of their decision to run a subway underneath the BHUSD campus and the Beverly Hills High School campus, is there money in the bond to be used for that in terms of facilities, and is the bond even allowed to pay for such expenditures?
Well, I suspect what's going to happen is something like this. I think because of the needs and urgency at the high school for things to be done now, that we're probably going to see a shift slightly in the way that which the money is going to be allocated in the near future, which is more towards the high school versus another elementary school. So Horace Mann will be done, and then I think we'll see some resources here at the high school. Then the question becomes, if that happens, what happens with the MTA wanting to come through and destroy everything. Basically, our bond money being used, and now it's going to be torn up or something. So, off the record, this is an off-the-record comment. You ready for this?
No.
No, you can't do it on the record? Okay.
I can't do off the record.
Then I'll put it on the record, okay?
Okay.
I have already picked out the tree on the campus that I'm going to hold on to when they try to do the MTA under it, okay?
Okay.
I'll show you the tree after the meeting.
Okay.
All right?
So, in other words, the bond can be used to pay for such expenditures.
Yeah, it has to, yeah.
Okay.
It's safety issues.
Okay, and I want to touch on, you talked about when the voters voted on the bond. There were some people that were against this bond entirely.
Yeah.
For those people that were against it, what do you have to say to them?
Well, I was one of them.
Oh, wasn't expecting that.
I know. And I'm telling you that because I didn't like the way the money was spent under Measure K.
Okay.
That's why I joined and wanted to be on the first group for the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure E. Because once it was passed by the voters, I said, wait a minute, I got to have something to say about this.
Okay. And how can you justify the spending of taxpayer dollars on what the bond is paying for now for those that were against it and still are against it?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, whether the community is against the bond expenditures now. I think there's questions about it, all very important questions, but I think there's a lot that's been happening in the last couple of years where I find the community is very supportive. The basic bottom line is going to be, are they going to see a school, Horace Mann, done properly? It's going to be validated in terms of assessment on engineering, architectural design, everything at the end of that project. And given all of that, I think the community is going to rally around bond money being used in a proper way.
Okay.
The problem has been it hasn't been in the past.
Okay. So you're hoping that by the way the current improvements pan out, it will show its justification in that way, and because you believe the community will be able to trust the COC and the school board in the way they spend the bond.
I sense that's happening already to some degree, and
Okay.
I sense it because there's as I said, a facilities advisory committee that's very active. Ed Brown's the chair of it, and he's doing a great job. Also with Joel Pressman and others that are really active in this whole area. I also think that there's a financial committee, for the district. We have a new superintendent, and we also have a new school board, but the new superintendent has taken a very active, concerned role in this. I mean, I don't know whether you know this or not, he literally, like today, on Fridays, rides his bicycle around each of the campuses. And I've even gotten my bicycle hat ready and my bike all ready to go with him, because that's saying something about what this community and this city needs. It needs more user-friendly facilities where we can walk our bikes, ride our bikes, but be safe. And that's what it's all about.
That's very true. And thank you for that. Speaking about the bond money, now I'm going to ask one more question on your future with this committee before we run out of time. You are a co-Nobel Prize recipient, and because it's kind of unclear on your website, were you the co-Nobel Peace Prize recipient or the co-Nobel Prize winner in economics recipient?
No, Peace Prize.
Okay.
The way that worked is that Al Gore won the Nobel Peace Prize in the same year, December 2007, and that's because of his film An Inconvenient Truth. And then there was a group of us, a large group, hundreds of people involved with the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We as a group were contributing scientists to reports that the Nobel Peace Prize wanted to acknowledge as being important for winning that prize.
Okay.
So together, that's what happened. And I have to say one thing more about that. What I've done since, in reaction to your question to me, is I feel that Al Gore did a great job in identifying the problems in climate change. I want to be involved with solutions. I want to solve the problems and do it correctly.
And that's a whole other conversation entirely.
I'll come back again.
Okay. What is the future of the Citizens Oversight Committee?
Well, I'm dedicated to it and staying with it. I have a 2-year term, and I'll be chair for another year and a half. And my concern is that we are in a very important, if you will, period of change, because we have other kinds of things going on with how monies were spent or misspent in the past. We're still dealing with that. But the basic thing is, I think what we have to do is look at now what the superintendent wants to do is an action plan for this district and what the plans are for the facilities. What we've got to do is see all of this integrated together, and that's one of the things that has to be done more in education. We have people trained in one area and trained in another. We've got to integrate these systems together, because if we're not on the same page, then you're going to go to a classroom. I know you're graduating, but you're going to go. Some students are going to go to a classroom. It's not going to be useful for teaching on whether it's on an electronic thing or Wi-Fi or whatever, or as a science lab. And we've got to be sure these are integrated.
Okay. So, and that is your future in terms of you.
No, I have nothing to do with the plan part. I just want to be sure we get a plan.
Yes, I'm talking about your previous comment. You jumped the gun a little bit on my question
sure.
about. So you are going to stay on and continue your
Yes.
2-year term,
Yeah.
and what you just said was the future of the committee as a whole.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen.
Well,
so,
as I said, also we want to get 3 new members too. It's very important.
Okay. And do you have future plans for any time running for higher office?
I think the correct answer would be yes, but they're not going to happen for a while. And
Okay.
I'm concerned about getting things done the way they need to be done now, but I have to say I'm very concerned about what I see happening both at the state and national level, but at the local level, for example, the taking away of environmental protection for certain things, and some of it's related to the metro, I think is a mistake, a very bad mistake. And I've already voiced my opinion in Sacramento. It has nothing to do with the COC, but I voiced my opinion in Sacramento to people I know there and have known there, because we can't allow that to happen. I'm a member of the board of the California Lung Association. We have Proposition 29 coming up. It's important that we do something about secondhand smoke in this state, because frankly, it's a hazard to all of us, and it's a hazard to future generations. And that's one of the things I get really dedicated and excited about doing.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for joining me on Let's Talk Politics today. I appreciate you coming in studio today. Beverly Hills, thank you for watching. Let's Talk Politics with me After Hours starts right now by calling 424-253-4MAX. You can also tweet me at MaxSchwartzTV. You can send Let's Talk Politics an email at ltpon6@gmail.com, and you can also comment and follow my blog at maxschwartztv.blogspot.com. Thank you, Beverly Hills, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.